Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Steve Stockton here with you. Thanks for joining us for this live Campfire Story stream. About to get things fired up here. Grendel, thanks for the donation there. Appreciate that, man. A lot of people are Tracy J, your first live stream. Welcome in. Some other familiar names here: Tennessee Horse Rescue, Stephen Davis, Scavone 72. Hi, Jessica. All right, you guys, let me know if you can hear me okay in the chat. We always like to make sure that there's no technical difficulties here, as it's sometimes these live streams are rife with them. Okay, got the all good. Tonight, just a few minutes, we're going to have Seth Brees from Skinwalker Radio joining us. First, though, I'm going to play a little video that I put together for the Monster Madness channel, another channel that I'm associated with. Yeah, I've got my finger in a lot of pies. Just started. I'll put a link in the chat. If you want to hear me narrate cryptid stories, go over there. It's run by Zuri Nicole Willis, who does the Appalachian Cryptids and Folklore and the High Strangeness group on Facebook. She put together a little production company. I do the production and the narration. She directs, and her and Heather Mosier write the scripts. And Josh Stewart does some awesome original artwork for us over there. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. And then when that's done, we'll bring our guest on. Just a moment here. Some call this place a paranormal hotspot, while others may call it cursed. For Terry and Gwen Sherman and their family, it's probably a little bit of both. The 480-acre cattle ranch nestled in the Uinta Basin in northeastern Utah has had its share of unexplainable events. Some refer to the area as a UFO hotspot. Others have named it UFO Alley. Most of us know it simply as Skinwalker Ranch. All the Shermans wanted was a quiet, peaceful place to live out the rest of their lives. Gwen was a native of the area. Terry was born and raised in Arizona before moving into the basin. The couple had no idea what awaited them nor what horrors they would soon encounter. The ranch was left in poor condition by the previous owners. As such, the Shermans had to spend countless hours restoring the property before they were finally able to move in. Not long after turning the ranch into their dream home, Terry noticed a strange circular depression in the pasture. This anomaly didn't bother him initially. He just assumed someone had removed a tree at some point in time, or perhaps it was a natural occurrence. It was April of 1995 when the story of Skinwalker Ranch would be written down in the pages of the paranormal. As Terry stepped outside on the front porch to check on a cow that was calving, he noticed strange lights in the field surrounding the ranch. Without warning, the lights abruptly shot over the tree line, disappearing into the night sky. In the months that followed, the Shermans would see many strange, unexplainable lights. One night, as many as a dozen of these lights danced over the fields. On another occasion, Terry and his son spotted a light that eventually vanished behind a rock ridge. In an attempt to sneak up on the light before it could disappear again, they headed toward the ridge. Upon finding it again, they attempted to communicate with the phenomenon. They jumped up and down while waving their hands about. In what later was suggested as an attempt to respond to Terry and his son's behavior, the light flashed on and off a total of 3 times. After the third flash, the light shot up into the sky and disappeared. The Shermans experienced many strange lights and UFO sightings during their time on the ranch. The occurrences were most often noticed during a new moon or when the sky was overcast in the moments preceding a storm. The family witnessed many oddities during such times, including a small box-like aircraft, as well as a huge ship that spanned the length of many fields. They also noticed strange lights that would emerge from circular doorways which had formed in mid-air. One night, as Gwen was driving home from work, a light appeared over her vehicle. Understandably alarmed, she chose to head back home. The light pursued her until she arrived safely at the ranch. On another occasion, Terry and the family dogs were out in one of the fields when male voices began speaking in an unidentifiable language. The words seemed to originate from above them, but there were no physical entities to be seen. The dogs became frantic as they stared up into the sky. They barked and growled before finally retreating back to the house. Out of fear, the dogs abandoned their master. Terry was left confused, frightened, and alone. It wasn't long after the sightings had begun that the family began losing a number of cattle. The animals were untouched, except for a precise hole in the center of the eyeball. No trace of blood was ever present. However, a strange chemical-like odor saturated the area closest to the dead livestock. One cow was reported to have a similarly precise small hole removed from its rectum. Eventually, the cattle simply vanished without a trace. The ones to disappear were often the best cattle, oddly enough. Terry reported that he surveyed the entire ranch looking for the missing cattle. This was a mystery that the family was never able to explain. During the winter, the snow provided a bit of aid to the family. They were able to follow the cloven hoof prints of their livestock to the edge of a tree line. It was at this tree line where the hoof prints stopped abruptly, as if the cow merely evaporated into thin air. Terry noticed a circle of broken branches in the trees surrounding the final hoof prints. Upon further investigation, he identified multiple treetops that appeared to be severed in an unexplainable manner. Many baffling events took place on the ranch, including sightings of a Bigfoot, Thunderbird, and Predator-type creatures. However, no one was prepared for what came next. One night, as Terry was standing outside watching his cattle, he encountered the kind of creature of which nightmares are made, a Goliath of a wolf. To his surprise, the enormous beast calmly approached Terry. After a few minutes passed, the wolf trotted off towards the cattle before suddenly biting one of the young cows on the face. It soon began dragging the calf away. Panicked, Terry reached for his shotgun and fired multiple shots. The bullets had no effect on the creature whatsoever. The beast simply faded away into the darkness after dropping the calf. The Sherman family experienced some sort of intelligent life when they lived on the property. An entity or presence of some sort seemed to play cat and mouse games with both the family as well as with researchers later on when the property switched ownership. It took only 18 months after purchasing the ranch before the Shermans were so terrified that they saw no other choice but to sell the property. It was purchased by billionaire Robert Bigelow under the name the National Institute for Discovery Science. He had been aware of the mysterious circumstances happening at the ranch and wanted to find out for himself the reasoning behind the oddities. After Bigelow's purchase, researchers were brought out to the property. They encountered something even more disturbing than had ever been reported by the Sherman family. One snowy evening, a creature appeared to be perched high up in a nearby tree. It sat motionless as it observed the team of scientists while they went about their work. Its sinister yellow eyes stared at them through the darkness. Eventually, the team turned their flashlights toward the tree, revealing a giant winged humanoid. In response to this terrifying image, one of the scientists fired his rifle in the direction of the humanoid. After the smoke cleared, the creature was gone. No body was ever found, and few traces remained of the creature. Further investigation by the researchers revealed a huge oval track left in the snow, 6 inches in diameter, with razor-sharp claws protruding from the back of the print. Skinwalker Ranch is said to be derived from an ancient Native American curse, a feud between the Ute tribe and the Navajo tribe. According to indigenous lore, a Navajo witch cursed the area by placing it under the Skinwalker curse. Today, after multiple sightings of humanoid creatures, the property still lives up to the legend. The ranch has been studied by many people over the years, from scientists to government officials. In 2016, the ranch changed ownership again. This time, the ranch was purchased by Brandon Fugel for Adamantium Real Estate, who has since equipped the property with various high-tech devices to help delve into the scientific study and exploration of the phenomena occurring in that area of Utah. Things may have appeared to quiet down for now, at least in the way of public reports, but Skinwalker Ranch will forever be known as one of the strangest places on Earth. The Uinta Basin holds many secrets left to be discovered, and it will continue to remain a beacon of paranormal activity for those who dare to explore it. Okay, and we're back with you live now. I hope you enjoyed that little video. That's something that I had a hand in that we did for the Monster Madness channel. New channel. Go subscribe over there if you like to hear me tell stories of cryptid encounters, true cryptid encounters and things. Again, that's from Sir Nicole Willis over on Facebook, High Strangeness and Appalachian Cryptids and Folklore Group. Okay, that was just kind of a little background thing. I'm going to bring in the guy that knows a lot more about the Skinwalker Ranch now. Seth Brees is the man behind Skinwalker Radio. Seth, come on in.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate you inviting me on a show to talk about this interesting topic with your audience.
Yeah, glad to have you with us. Let's just make sure that they're able to hear you, okay? Give me something in the chat there if you can hear Seth okay. Just want to make sure. Don't trust my own engineering here. I do everything behind the scenes too, so there's a problem. There's nobody blaming it on me. Okay. Getting it all good. Thanks to everybody that's coming in, joining us tonight. Thanks for the super chats that have gone in. We really appreciate those. TC, glad you're with us tonight. She's the best mod in the business. She mods for this channel and several others. I know she does Sean Graham's Chasing the Truth, Paranormal. Another good show. That's on Saturday nights on the Dark Waters Network and live 107.7 FM Talk Radio in New Orleans. But tonight we've got Seth Brees. So Seth, tell us a little bit about your podcast, Skinwalker Radio.
Yeah, so, admittedly, I never sat out to do a paranormal conspiracy theory kind of themed podcast at all. I was actually doing a podcast about veterans. I'm a veteran myself. I was in the Air Force for over a decade.
Well, thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I had a podcast where I was interviewing veterans about their experiences and life after the military. Kind of a community public service type of a thing, right? And I had a buddy who reached out to me one day. He's like, "Hey man, you got to talk to my friend. He's got the wildest story to tell you." And I said, "Okay, great." So I gave him a call, and he told me about how he worked for Robert Bigelow for 6 years at a place called Skinwalker Ranch. And I knew nothing about Skinwalker Ranch at that time. So I talked to him on the phone for probably 45 minutes, and he told me, where he worked and what was going on there and why he worked there and all this other stuff. And I was just blown away. And I had no experience with Skinwalker Ranch at the time. And little did I know that, that would kind of turn into a podcast of my own where I investigate, not only what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch, but all of the little tentacles that come out of Skinwalker Ranch and go in a million directions. But Skinwalker Ranch seems to be kind of a hub and a focal point for a lot of things happening. And your video did a great job talking about some of the things that the Sherman family experienced during the 90s when they bought the ranch. Some of the most famous stories are obviously, the bulletproof wolf, right? That seems to have almost kind of trance-like properties. So this wolf allegedly strolls up out of nowhere, comes within almost, arm's distance to the family. The family does not seem to be overly alarmed at this, and that wolf almost kind of has a calming presence about it until, it flips a switch and grabs a calf. And then at that point, they're like, oh, wait, no, this is a real wolf. This is a huge problem we have to deal with. And then they start shooting at it. And, it appears to be impervious to bullets. They shoot at it twice with two different guns, and the second gun was a 30-06 hunting rifle. And I don't know if anybody out there hunts, but a 30-06 can kill pretty much anything on the planet, including elephants, if you're a good shot. So the fact that it took bullets from a 30-06 and yet didn't die, let alone give up or fall down and bleed to death, is really kind of fantastical. And one can only assume that, there's something going on there with that wolf that is not quite normal in the sense of it being just a regular wolf. So Skinwalker Ranch got its name from the legend of the Skinwalker. Your video mentioned that. A Skinwalker is a malevolent being in the Ute and the Navajo culture. And one does not want to come in contact with a Skinwalker for fear of potentially being possessed or killed outright. But the Skinwalkers are famous because they have the ability to take the form of a man, but also take the form of a wolf or a beast or a dog or a coyote. Wolf is generally kind of what's associated with the Skinwalkers. So when we hear the story of the bulletproof wolf, we kind of have to wonder, if that wasn't, a Skinwalker masquerading around as a wolf, right? I don't know. It would be wild to be there at the time and witness something like that. And then, it's in classic tradition with the Skinwalker Ranch. You see something weird one day, and then 5 minutes later, it's gone. And it's almost like it never happened, and you're kind of left wondering if you imagine the whole thing.
Wow. Well, that certainly filled in some more gaps there. Yeah, that was just a little video that we put together. We have short videos over there talking about things, but that is such an odd place out there, and the bulletproof wolf, that's just one of many legends there. I mean, there's been UFOs, cattle mutilations, other types of cryptids, and allegedly interdimensional beings and stuff. Now, have you ever been near the ranch?
I myself have never been there, and it would be interesting to go, but at the same time, I don't know if I ever really want to. I've talked to several people who've been there, and some of the stories I've heard are convincing enough to make me think twice about ever stepping foot out there.
Yeah.
One of the stories that really kind of solidified that opinion for me is the idea of what's known as the hitchhiker. So people who visit Skinwalker Ranch can be witness to any norm of any kind of paranormal activity, right? So ghosts and poltergeists and UFOs and portals and orbs, water babies, the skinwalkers, the wolves, you name it. But one of the things that really kind of stuck out to me was the idea that when you visit Skinwalker Ranch and then leave, that's not necessarily the end of the story. There are occasions and reports of people visiting Skinwalker Ranch and then something coming back home with them. And that's not a risk that I'm really eager to take on myself.
Yeah, we've got another story that we did a video for that I think it happened back in the 90s or maybe even before that, of the old Route 666 that went up through New Mexico and Nevada and over into Utah. And the person met up with a skinwalking hitchhiker. Um, he was driving from school in, I think, Colorado to his parents' house in Utah and kept encountering this same beast on the road. No matter how far he drove, it would show back up again. And each time it looked hairier and scarier. And eventually he holed up in a place on the side of the road, an abandoned travel trailer, I think it was, and waited for daylight. But a harrowing experience. That whole area there is supposedly under a curse. You know, the Utes and the Navajo. There's places there that they won't go, and places that they consider, you know, bad medicine, if you will. And that whole area is just fascinating. Just some of the things that have gone on there. In fact, one of our listeners, Janine, good friend of mine, she is there in Utah today, and she sent some pictures to me earlier via messenger. Thank Janine for these. Apparently the fancy gate is gone now. Let's see what we've got there now. That was taken earlier today, just a couple of hours ago. That's the road leading into the Skinwalker Ranch. And there's the warning sign. It's still there. And again, the road leading up to it. And then that's the ridge there behind Skinwalker Ranch that you see in the videos and stuff. So, in your opinion, Seth, what do you think's going on there? Is it an Indian curse? Is it, or sorry, Native American curse? Or is it something more? Is it extraterrestrials? Is it cryptids?
Yeah.
Interdimensional beings? All the above?
You know, that's the $1 million question. I know there's a lot of other people who do a lot of really good shows to talk about this kind of thing, and everybody's got maybe just a little piece of the pie. And I think a lot of people want to try to find the silver bullet, so to speak, to explain everything. And I'm not so sure that's possible. I think there are a myriad of explanations, and I think that they're all working at the same time. So to start with, you know, paranormal activity and weird stuff happens all over the planet all the time to all kinds of people, right? So that's not unique to Skinwalker Ranch. What's unique to Skinwalker Ranch is that it happens so almost predictably. And for some reason, that little piece of property, that 480 acres, is such a hotbed for activity. And it's not really located to that ranch, but the ranch is famous for it. That whole basin of the Uintah Basin is definitely known. They estimate that something like 10 or 12% of all the people who live there have had an experience witnessing a UFO. There's been a lot of research to suggest that that whole area is just littered with orbs and portals and walkers. And, you know, you got to ask why that area. And I can't help but think that the Native American legend definitely plays into that. If you read into some of the mythology of the Native Americans, it's in particular the Navajo, you read about their creation stories, and then you think about, you know, Skinwalker Ranch. You can't help but think, yeah, okay, that makes sense. You know, there's absolutely something there. You know, and that whole area was Native American land for the longest time, and a lot of it still is. You know, Skinwalker Ranch is bordered by a Indian reservation. Fort Duchesne is an Indian land, so that's just right next door. And legend has it that the skinwalkers originate from tribal land and then migrate out from there to walk all around the basin. and just cut a path right across Skinwalker Ranch on the way to wherever it is that they're going. So you have the natural occurring stuff like that paranormal stuff. You have a government interest, which is really kind of where I come in, right? I mean, we all know the really cool stories from the 90s and up to the Bigelow days. What I'm really interested in is what happened after that. So we know, the orbs and the portals and the cattle manipulations and the Skinwalker and the bulletproof wolf and the UFOs and all that cool stuff. But, the story kept going and is still going to this day. We often lose sight of the time frame when the ranch was sold and Bigelow bought it. But investigations are still happening right now. The History Channel's gearing up for season 2 of the Skinwalker Ranch show that they have. And that's pretty interesting. And I've had the opportunity to interview the ranch superintendent for my podcast. His name is Thomas Winterton. And he's worked out there since Brandon Fugel bought the ranch from Robert Bigelow. And just the stories that he has, he's like, it's just here and then it's gone. It's like it knows you're there. It knows you're interested. So it gives you just a little taste and then it's gone. Cell phones just die. Camera batteries die. Equipment malfunctions at the critical moment when you need it to gather some kind of piece of evidence. You just can't have any reliable information gathered, really, just because it's like it knows you want that, so it's not gonna let you get it, but it'll visually or audibly present itself, right, just so you personally know, but not give you enough information to really share with the world or gather anything concrete and repeatable. So the scientific endeavors are very frustrating for that area. And I think Bigelow could probably attest to that if he opened up his records, which to my knowledge are still sealed. You mentioned that he had NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science. So he bought the land from the Shermans for $200,000 shortly after, that major article was written about the Shermans in the Desert Times, which is the newspaper of that area. And then I think within 3 months, they had sold it to Bigelow. And he comes in, starts NIDS, handpicks a bunch of scientists. They come out and do their investigations. They don't stay on the ranch full time, so they report to incidences that may have occurred. And we don't really know what they found. Allegedly they found, some good information, but to my knowledge, a lot of that's still under lock and key for Robert Bigelow. And you kind of got to ask, why? Is it under lock and key because they found something really cool? Or is it under lock and key because they found absolutely nothing? Or at least nothing provable, right, in a traditional scientific experiment. But
yeah. I think it's the former. I think they found something that they're not willing to discuss because it's huge. Now that's just my personal opinion. It could be the other way. It could be they found absolutely nothing and he wanted to save face, and because he spent a lot of money out there.
Yes, so. Yeah, and he recouped some of that money. So what people may not know is that the Shermans owned the ranch. They sold it to Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow had NIDS, but after he had NIDS, Robert Bigelow was offered a contract to the tune of $22 million by the Defense Intelligence Agency. And the purpose of this, and you can Google the information behind it, and it's really interesting and kind of telling in its own way, was to study aerial phenomenon under a program called OSAP. And you may or may not be familiar with that, but you should look it up. It's very interesting. And essentially, the government took interest in aerial phenomenon under 2 programs, ATIP and OSAP. And under these programs, which are very top secret, but have been somewhat talked about since then, they spent a lot of money with people like Bigelow to try to investigate aerial threats and aerial phenomenon, which is, in my opinion, just keyword for UFOs. So he owns this ranch. The DIA writes him a $22 million contract, and then BASS is formed. I think that's Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Studies. And BASS runs for quite a while, many years, underneath the government umbrella of the OSAP program. And it's under BASS is that where the story starts with the individual who I interviewed. And he worked at BASS for 6 years, which was quite a while, really, to work out at Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, that's one of the longest running people, I would think, to have experience out there. The Shermans lived there for only 18 months. Bigelow didn't actually live there. So there are a group of people, I think, who are like ranch hands or ranch managers who live there full time. But other than that, 6 years is a very long time. And one of his primary duties was to be a security guard. But the security guards also doubled as data finders and scientific experiment facilitators. So while he was pulling double duty out there, oftentimes all by himself for 2 weeks at a time, he would not only patrol the perimeters, keep an eye on things, he would also have to conduct various scientific experiments. But what was interesting is that the equipment issued was not really that great. It was kind of subpar equipment for what you might expect for somebody with the means of Robert Bigelow to issue to his people, especially considering that he just received a $22 million contract to investigate things. So the question always is, why the crummy equipment, and what did they have them really looking for, and what were they trying to accomplish? And there's a lot of unknowns there, but they would have like really old cameras. They would have antique equipment that is by no means state of the art. So the information that they could gather was probably pretty minimal given the equipment and the circumstances. They don't really have the ability to set up legitimate scientific experiments and hypothesize and then test and then retest and then come up with solutions, because their primary duty is being a security guard, right? So they have to make sure that locals aren't invading the ranch and having parties, and tourists aren't coming to check out the local legends, and keeping all those people off the property is their primary goal. So it's almost kind of like maybe Bigelow didn't really want to find out and used the money for some other purpose than perhaps what he could have been doing with the scientific experiments. But some of the experiments were a little weird. They would have children's blocks that they would put around the dilapidated buildings and then hope to come back and find that they were rearranged. I believe that they had plants growing on one of the command centers, and the idea was that they could test these plants versus plants grown off-site and then compare the two for things like growth rates, but also maybe perhaps things like radiation, just to see if that was a factor. It's unknown if they found anything, but yeah, it's all very peculiar. And then, Bigelow up and sells the ranch to Brandon Fugel, who owns it now. And then, he develops it even further. And then he has the History Channel show out, which if you guys have seen the show, what I'm talking about. They keep trying to do a bunch of different experiments, and nothing ever really seems to pan out very well. And every now and then they get just a little tidbit of information, but it's very fleeting. And I know it's got to be super frustrating to not be able to get any clear-cut answers.
Makes for good television, though. It's kind of like the Oak Island show where the brothers are looking for the treasure there on Oak Island. Every episode they find just a little something, just enough to entice you to watch the next episode. So maybe it's something like that where they do have some information, but they're just kind of dragging it out to make for good viewing.
It's actually the same producers, I heard.
Okay.
So there you go.
But I love both shows, and just fascinating stuff. Had some questions in the chat here. Cisco Murdoch from Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast wants to know, what about the stories of portals there? There's been stories of like people witnessing a portal open up and something walk through it, just casually stroll out.
Yeah, that's a common thing. So, people see portals in the sky, and there I think there are orange ones and there are blue ones. And they see portals on the ground, and it looks like people are coming out, and allegedly the skinwalkers are coming out of the portals. And then again, when you read the Native American legends for the creation stories and things of that nature, it almost kind of sounds like there's portals in the creation mythology, of the Navajo people. If my memory serves me right, they basically escaped from one world to this world in what looks and reads like a portal of some kind. So whether or not that's still happening, and this is like the epicenter of that story, is really hard to decipher. But yeah, absolutely, the portals have been seen, and it's uh it's always kind of curious to me, if you timed one right, if you could walk through it. I
Yeah, and
I
what would
have
be
no
on the
idea.
other side, and would you do it if you knew
I
there's
know.
a chance you
Not,
couldn't come back?
not me, but there might be some brave souls out there, and
I think so. I think there are people that would do that. And the portals, that's in everything. That's not just there, but like in the South, some of the Dogman stories. They've seen Dogman come strolling out of a portal on two legs. Portals are nearby some Bigfoot sightings and things. There's been a report of that. So whatever it is, it knows how to use these portals, or the things coming through do anyway. So frightening.
well, yeah, and the portal activity and a lot of the weird stuff seems to be somewhat focused to the hills. So if you Google Skinwalker Ranch, you can see that on the north side of there's a little creek, and just on the other side of the creek, there's some hills, and that seems to be kind of the epicenter for all the weird stuff. A lot of the lights and the orbs and the portals, they seem to be focused on that area. So. The show does a lot of radiation tests, and it always seems like the radiation is coming from above. So it's as if there's something up there that we just can't quite see, and then sometimes it reveals itself. It's very strange.
And another question here, Jack Malarkey. Thank you for the super chat. He wants to know what you think of the new Skinwalker Ranch show. Do you think it overly dramatizes or embellishes with regards to the evidence that they do present?
Yes, I think it does, but I think it has to, so I'm not really upset about that. And I talked to the ranch manager on the podcast, and he mentioned that. He's like, we might be out there for 5 hours. We might have five dead cameras, and then all of a sudden we get one little snippet, and that's what makes it on the show. What they don't show is the 5 hours that was before that, where we also found interesting things, but we just couldn't capture it because camera malfunctions, dead batteries, you name it. So I think the show has to take what little they can physically capture, which is probably 20%, if that. Right, and then they have to
Mm-hmm.
obviously try to make that as compelling as possible, with the pauses and the dramatic acting that kind of gets interjected into some of that, and that's just the nature of television, though. I
Yeah.
mean, because it's not the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Well, we'll sit around and listen to that for 3 hours with an in-depth conversation. They have to fit things into, a 1 hour time block plus commercials. So what they do is they've got to make it as interesting as they possibly can, even if they didn't have a whole lot to capture in that one time. So that's just TV for you, though. I mean, I don't know that it necessarily has any real bearing on the mysteries and the things that they've found at the ranch as far as evidence. But TV is how it is.
It is what it is. They don't call it programming without reason. But you think about that though. Even if you just have a little nugget of truth, you couldn't go on and have like a 30-second show and say, okay, here it is.
Yeah.
Instead you build up, show that at the end, and then hint at something else. Again, cliffhangers. That's since films have been around, radio, all that, they've used that device, that trope in there. But it works. It draws the audience and it raises awareness. It brings it to
Yeah.
the fore. It gets people talking about it, and it is what it is. I mean, it's better than not having any information or not having any shows or books or what have you about these subjects. And if that were the case, a lot of people like us would be out of hobbies and out of work and all kinds of things.
Yeah, and it's fun to watch. it's just fun to watch too. I mean, it's a TV show. There's plenty of things you can read in depth about the TV shows, but it's good entertainment.
Yeah. And my book, Strange Things in the Woods, which is a collection of other people's stories, I've been approached about doing that as an anthology series and have some interest in it from some cable providers. I can't say much right now, but I'm interested to see how they take those stories and how much it would change from the stories that I heard and then what I wrote and then how it would be presented to an audience. But
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes. Well, now, I know you talk about things other than just Skinwalker Ranch on your show. What are some other topics that you enjoy? Maybe pet favorites or just other things that you find interesting?
Yeah, so I cover a lot of different topics. So Skinwalker Ranch was how I got started, but then I realized like I can't just talk about Skinwalker Ranch. One, because I don't want to beat a dead horse, right? As information comes up, like I'm happy to talk about that. But what I also realized is that Skinwalker Ranch is the focal point for all things weird. And there's so much going on there that needs to be explored individually as individual topics. So, the Skinwalker and then UFOs. So I went down the rabbit hole with UFOs for a while, and I talked to some of the witnesses of the Tic Tac UFO encounter that the U.S. Navy famously encountered, and had a couple of those guys on. So one of the guys, Pat Hughes, he was on. Then I had Gary Voorhees, who was on, and both of those guys were active duty U.S. Navy when, the Tic Tac incident was famously happening on the aircraft carriers, the Nimitz, and then they had the USS Roosevelt that was out there. There's also gathering data and really explored that one pretty well. And it's still kind of a mystery, right? So with these things, like we can gather all of the eyewitness testimony we want, but at the end of the day, we all kind of agree that, yeah, we don't really know what it is. But every time we have the conversations, we put out a new theory, have a new idea, and kind of maybe get a little bit closer to a solid hypothesis on what we think it is. So the Tic Tac UFO in particular, I'm a little torn on that. I personally, and this is my personal opinion, I don't believe it was UFOs. I think it was government in some way, shape, or form. Whether it was an actual government nuts and bolts craft or perhaps a delusion of sorts because the technology exists to do that. When I think about the story of the USS Nimitz and how it was out there, and they were having brand new radar equipment installed on the fleet, and it just so happens when they get this brand new radar stuff installed on the fleet and they're going out for their test drives out there off the coast of California, that this Tic Tac incident happens. And to me, that just screams testing new toys above all things. And I think personally that Tic Tac is probably an advanced weapon of sorts. And I don't know exactly what it is, how it works, but I don't think that it is otherworldly. And that opinion is actually counter to what I don't know, call it the acceptable opinion, and the narrative seems to be. The narrative seems to be is that UFOs are a given, and that it's only a matter of time before they're disclosed. And in my personal opinion, just based off the conversations I've had and the things I've seen in the military, and I don't necessarily believe that's true. I think it's entirely possible that, little green men and extraterrestrials are real. I'm not saying that. I just don't think that things like the Tic Tac and the Go Fast and the gimbal are extraterrestrials. I really don't.
Yeah, because that was always the thing. Just an unidentified flying object. It means just that. It's unidentified. It could be one of ours. It could be one of theirs. It could be from another galaxy or another planet. Who knows? That's the fun in the thinking. And I was involved with the UFO world quite a bit years ago, but there's just, and also in the Bigfoot community to some degree, there's just so much toxicity there and so
Mhm.
much infighting. It just kind of ruins everything. It ruins all the fun for me. Because essentially, I'm a storyteller. I've done some hard research. I've done some investigations and things in the past, but I like hearing the stories and then repeating the stories. That's my forte.
Yeah.
But
No,
uh,
I agree.
go ahead.
No, I agree with you. I mean, the storytelling is really where it's at for me. I like to nerd out and go down the details and come up with hypothesis, but at the end of the day, I don't necessarily have a dog in the fight. I have my personal opinions, as we all do. We all have our opinions about everything, but I try to steer clear of the echo chambers to the
Hmm.
best of my ability. And I honestly I don't even really use social media very much at all. And I have a very small social media presence with my podcast. And everything I do is mostly just kind of organic in that sense. And I've seen the toxicity you talk about, and there is a book that I recommend to everybody who's interested in the topic, and it's called American Cosmic, and you should check it out because it's written by a woman named Diana Pulaski, I believe. Forgive me if I butcher that, but I really like her book because she suggests that we are watching a new religion form right in front of our eyes in regards to the UFO and paranormal cultures. So if you think about the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of a religion, so something remarkable happens, and somebody witnesses it or multiple people witness it, so they get together and they talk about it and they discuss it and they throw out their theories and they kind of come to a conclusion. So what that really is, it's the same mechanisms that worked in religion, right?
Hmm.
So your acceptable theories after your analysis is really what becomes your dogma at that point. And that's happening in real time in front of our eyes. And it's very wild to see because it is basically becoming a new religion centered around UFOs. Disclosure is basically paramount to the Messiah coming, and they look forward to disclosure with the same zeal that some people look forward to the second coming of Christ, or whatever the Messiah is for whatever religion. And it's very interesting, and I don't know that they so like outside looking in, it's all
Sorry, my phone. Thought I had my phone muted and it went off. I apologize for that. Yeah, I was on with Melissa Dawn, who has the Deprogrammed podcast. Recently, we recorded a segment on Halloween folklore that's going to air, I think, Friday the 30th. And she talks about that. And she's come under attack from members of some of these so called saucer cults, where
mm-hmm.
it's become like a religion, and they didn't appreciate the things she said, and literally came after her. They came after the channel, and then she was getting threats personally and stuff. It's some people take that way too seriously, I think. I mean, again, each their own. But when you get to the point that, somebody else's opinion bothers you to the point that you want to go out and do physical harm to them, I don't support that.
Yeah, so that's religious extremism is what that is.
Mm-hmm.
That's zealotry, and we see it in the real world to the nth degree, and it's happening with UFOs, right? And what's interesting to me is that so many of us will decry and denounce religious extremism, but so many of the people who do that would support, you know, some of the same behaviors in the pursuit of what they deem to be science in the form of UFOs. So it can be very hypocritical in that sense. But I agree that it's not that important, right? So at the end of the day, these are theories, right? We don't have a UFO landing on the White House lawn yet, and that may never happen. I know some people look forward to it, but these are just ideas, and we should be able to freely and openly discuss ideas. And we should welcome people to challenge our ideas because that will make us dig deeper and come up with more information and strengthen our own arguments. And we should welcome that and not necessarily try to avoid that or even shut people down.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Got some other questions in the chat here. Get over to that screen real quick. Sorry, I'm Technical difficulties behind the screen here. Stephen Davis, thank you for the super chat, sir. He wants to know if you have any information about the rake.
I don't. Sorry, I'm not familiar with that one. I would like to learn more, so I'm going to write that down, and maybe that would be a good discussion topic for my podcast.
Yeah,
How do
I
you spell
think
that?
that's one of the Rake. That's one of those, I think, like Slender Man, that started out as either a creepypasta or some kind of internet legend or story, and depending on how you look at it, became sort of a tulpa, where enough people thinking about it and putting energy toward it has caused it to manifest. Slender Man, that started out on the internet as a creepypasta. People talked about it and wrote the fan fiction and the stories, and there was a video game and a movie. And then it gets to the point where you have people that are having sightings of Slender Man. You have the two little girls, whoever it was, that had planned to kill one of their classmates in order to sacrifice her to Slender
Yep.
Man. So
Remember
something
that.
going on there, and those kind of things can happen. And I'm part Cherokee, and the elders of the Cherokee will tell you that there's certain things that you don't talk about, and that you have to be careful even thinking about, because just that alone can draw it to you. These, whatever they are, can feed off that energy, and it gives them more power.
100%. And that's true, more than I think most people give it credit for. So, whether it's physically true or whether it's, paraphysically true or paranormally true, two different things, So in the Christian tradition, right, the Bible tells you to focus on what's good, what's holy, and this, that, and the other, and it tells you point blank, don't do this, don't engage with psychic mediums, don't communicate with the dead, because you're not aware of what you're doing, and you might get in trouble. So I think the reason for that is just like you mentioned, cultures have long ago figured out, kind of a safe operating model. And that is, we do talk about this, we don't talk about that because bad things happen. And you can argue that maybe Slender Man isn't real, but I would argue that to the point where young girls are convinced that Slender Man is real enough to sacrifice another school child, then it's real enough, right? And it might not ever physically be real, but it's paranormally real once you get into that territory.
Yeah, just amazing. Just again, it's one of those things, the power of the mind. There's a story that I always love to tell about Walter Gibson, who, writing as Maxwell Grant, wrote all the old shadow stories from the old pulp magazines and the radio shows, hundreds and hundreds of them. Well, this apartment that he lived in New York City in Greenwich Village, he would have guests over, say for a dinner party, and they would see somebody dressed as the Shadow. Lamont Cranston was the character's name, with the slouch hat and the red scarf and the big trench coat. And they were like, "Oh, did you hire somebody to come over and play the Shadow to entertain us?" And he's like, "No, he really exists." And what Gibson put forth was, he called it a psychic impression or a psychic image. And this was a man who was so prolific, he had 5 or 6 typewriters set up with a different story going in each typewriter, and would go from typewriter to typewriter as he wrote. So he literally poured blood, sweat, and tears into these shadow books and stories and radio plays. And in his opinion, that he created that, using the power of his mind, and that's what caused it to manifest. But regardless of the explanation that he gave, that's the same thing as that you have as a tulpa.
Yeah, there's kind of a legend out there, and it's really unsubstantiated. But have you ever heard of Project Looking Glass?
I'm familiar with it, but go ahead and fill our audience in.
Yeah, and so really, there's not a whole lot of information out there. There's really only one video of a alleged whistleblower, but the idea is that the government has the ability, through what they called Project Looking Glass, to do the exact thing what we just mentioned. And I think it probably works off computer algorithms, but really have no idea. And we don't even know if it really ever existed. But the idea is that you introduce a narrative or an idea into the population, and then you kind of wait and see if that has a desired effect. So the Shadow Man you mentioned, in the Rake and the Slender Man, somebody introduced this idea into the population, and then that idea had effects upon the population in which it was introduced. So it's very real in that sense. So the question is, with Project Looking Glass, what did the government have interest in as far as introducing ideas? And we can only surmise that they were doing it for political purposes, perhaps, or mass population deception. So if they can introduce an idea and then use their propaganda channels to push this idea out into the masses, can they predict a inevitable outcome that idea will have upon society with computer algorithms? And that's really the idea of Project Looking Glass. And allegedly, it worked pretty well until I think 2012 is when this project originally just, I guess it broke. And they could somewhat predict the near-term future using this Project Looking Glass. And then it broke. And we don't know why it broke. We don't know how it broke. But we can only guess is that something is happening in the somewhat near future that is a guaranteed outcome that the government cannot possibly manipulate with their propaganda efforts. If you tell a story long enough, it begins to be truth. I think Hitler said that. And what we've seen in history is that is absolutely true. If you tell a lie enough times, people will either believe it or they will just generally accept it so they can stop hearing about it. So whatever this event is that's on the horizon, that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't avoid that reality. It's allegedly, a guarantee. We don't know what this is. Some people might say that's UFO disclosure. Some people might tell you that was the election of Donald Trump. Who knows? There's a lot of theories as to what Project Looking Glass saw that made them just completely abandon the project, because no matter what they did, the end result never changed. So I guess we'll find out, really.
No. And I also like what I've read about the way Looking Glass ties into Project Bluebeam. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the Bluebeam technology?
I don't have any real firm opinions on that. When we start talking about things like Project Looking Glass and Bluebeam and all those kind of things, it's really hard to get any kind of real data points. So they're fun stories to talk about, but we really kind of are left to speculate a lot. One of the things that I like to talk about that is actually provable is Project Mockingbird. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not, but I did an episode on that. And Project Mockingbird was the idea is that the government manipulates what we see on a day-to-day basis. And when I think about Project Mockingbird and Looking Glass and then Bluebeam, like you brought up, to me, they're all working in unison somehow. So when you think about Mockingbird, that is the dissemination side of Looking Glass. So Looking Glass needs to put forth an idea and then see if the idea has the desired result. Well, Mockingbird would be the drive and the push behind the ideas that they want to put out. And it could be something as simple as propaganda against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. It could be something else, like the inevitability of electing this certain person for a unique Senate seat in Wisconsin. Who knows, right? Could be mundane. So I think that there's a grain of truth in all of this, and I think they're all probably somehow connected at the end of the day.
I agree. And then you have other programs in there that may or may not exist. MK Ultra, for example, or like the cloaking technology. One of the popular videos here on this channel, we talk about the some people call it the Glimmer Man or the Predator-like creature. What do you think that is? Do you think that's another type of cryptid, shapeshifter, something from another dimension, or is that some sort of high technology that our government or some government has access to that can make people almost invisible?
I think that there's probably something earthly and man-made that probably they're getting close to. I think that there's couple different ways to slice it. When we think about, the technology only stuff, absolutely, I think we're getting very close to being able to have the ability, maybe not to cloak and become invisible per se, but I do think that we have the ability to project images as a reality when they're not really a reality, right? So you might see something that's physically in front of you, but that thing in front of you is not really there. I think we have the ability, as far as deception, very closely in the near future to do that on a mass scale.
Mm-hmm.
My personal belief is that this will be used eventually, and I don't know when this will be. This could be 5 years. This could be 25 years. I think this deception technology that is in the works will be used in unison with all of the other things we just talked about, Mockingbird and Looking Glass and Bluebeam and whatever other fringe project. It's all going to come together at some point. And that
Yeah.
point will be the effort of, call it the deep state, the Illuminati, the NWO, the globalists, whatever you want to call them, whoever you think they are.
And then you've got other things in there. It's all about control. HARP, which some people claims is used to control the weather. And then you've got other little elements like that in place. So it's all about control and making things appear one way. I mean, look at all the deep fakes that are out there on the web now. You can't believe video now, which just a few years ago, photos or video, or especially video, was irrefutable proof. Now it means nothing. Anybody, a kid at home on his home computer, can fake a video that's 100% believable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all that stuff's going to come to a head, and it's all going to come home to roost someday.
And
They
Cisco's
talk.
mentioning Project Paperclip there. That was
Yeah.
interesting one where they brought some of the top scientific minds out of Nazi Germany and put them to work in the labs in America. Now, there's people that don't believe that, but my father worked at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he worked right along some of those guys that they had brought over from Germany. And in fact, one of the kids that I went to school with, I went over to visit his house one time, and he took me down in the basement. His father had a den down there, and he opened up a room in the back, and inside was all this German memorabilia. And I'm like, wow, your dad really, really likes this stuff. And he's like, you don't understand. He said, that's my dad's uniform. So it was Project Paperclip is 100% real, in my opinion, just based on people that I talked to that knew about it.
Yep, absolutely. There's no question about it, and it's well documented. So in Hutchinson, Kansas, we have what's called the Cosmosphere. It's a small town in central Kansas, and you can go check it. It's a world-class space museum, and they have the biggest collection of Soviet space memorabilia outside of Russia. It's fantastic. They have an SR-71. They have a half of a. They got a lunar lander. It's just great. But they even in there, they have a whole entire presentation about Operation Paperclip and how Werner von Braun was brought over to kickstart the American rocket program. And a lot of people don't also realize is that the American military brought millions of Nazis to United States soil during the war. And we used them as essentially slave labor. To go to farms and backfill and grain silos and work as truck mechanics. My grandfather worked on Fort Riley in Kansas, and my great grandfather worked there. So my grandpa used to tell me stories about how his dad and my great grandfather worked as a truck mechanic in an auto shop on Fort Riley next to Nazis. Right, and they were on a work release program. Not all of the people in the German army were SS zealots. Most of them could care less about being a Nazi, but they're drafted. What do you do, right?
Yeah, the old just following orders
Yeah. So we had
statement.
millions of them in the continental United States, and a lot of them stayed after the war. And they did the farming. All of the boys were out fighting the war. There was nobody left to do the farming. The Nazis were allowed to go to Kansas wheat fields and do the farming. They were expected to come home at the end of the day, and almost in mass, there were zero issues with the Nazis because they were very orderly people, all right? And there weren't really any zealots. They did a pretty good job screening them out for SS types and war criminals and stuff like that. Most of these were just 18, 19, 21-year-old kids who they didn't want to fight in the war to begin with. So there were really very little issues. But there's some really great documentaries about how we used Nazi labor here in the United States during the wartime.
Amazing. I've got some more questions in the chat here. Somebody's asking about some of the pics lately that have come out of CERN and what they're up to over there. What's your opinion on that, and how do you think it ties in, like some people claim it does, with the Mandela effect?
Yeah, I'm not sure CERN is ever going to accomplish what it wants to accomplish. I don't know. I just have my doubts. They're after the quote unquote God particle. I firmly believe that there are limits on what we can achieve, and I'm not sure that that is going to be one of them. I do think that there's a probability that they might get very close and then potentially have some advances in technology that are good, but I don't know that it's going to be as lofty as they hope. And I hope that what they don't do is find the opposite. So if they find the God particle, I hope they don't do the opposite and somehow create some kind of mass chain reaction.
Yeah, like a black hole or antimatter or something that.
Yeah.
One of the comments here in the chat, Sunshine says CERN is messing with technology it has no comprehension of, opening up portals and blurring dimensions.
I agree.
Yeah, scary stuff.
It's science, and scientists, they always push the envelope because that's how you learn things. I just hope that it doesn't bite us, and they create something that we regret. We created chemical weapons and nuclear weapons. We regret that. That's just a terrible thing for humanity. And, I hope it bears positive fruit, but, to be determined.
Yeah. Well, and just play devil's advocate here, nuclear energy, it's clean energy if you don't count the waste, as far as power, and it's good for submarines and things like that can use heavy shielding. But yeah, it definitely has its downside. But my father talked about that and talked about his father, how he'd talked the same thing about electricity. When electricity became commonplace, particularly in Appalachia, there were people that was afraid of it and thought that it was going to destroy the world, that it would set the world on fire, that we had no business trying to harness, lightning, essentially. And, then now you don't think twice about flipping a light switch and the light comes on.
Yep.
That's magic, to somebody just a few generations ago. And there was even a time I've heard about where some of the first films, moving pictures, the audience fled the theater because the curtains open and they see a train coming at them and they thought it was real, even though it was in black and white. I still don't know how that worked, but any kind of new technology I think is frightening in its infancy. If you have no idea, what it is or how it works, of course it's going to bother some people, probably the majority of people.
Yeah, and I think, we should always have a cautious pessimism too. I think that's just safe. I think that keeps things in balance. Technology can be good, but I think it needs to happen at a slow and steady pace in a predictable fashion. And then we need to kind of pause, and then we need to see its effects on society. Cell phones are a perfect example. Everybody has one. You can't leave without it. If your little battery bar goes red, we have anxiety about that. We check it every 5 seconds. I don't think that's altogether healthy. And cell phones is a new thing. Cell phones been around 15 years max, something like that.
Yeah, I had one of the old bag phones back in I think the early '90s even. They had to carry around. The battery was bigger than the phone, and just now my cell phone, it's become almost a part of me. It's I use it as a watch. I use it as entertainment. I look things up on it. I keep my addresses and phone numbers in there. When I was a kid growing up, you knew everybody's number that you needed to call. If you didn't, you looked in the phone book. Now I'd have to think about it a minute to even tell you what my number is, or what my daughter's number is. It's in my phone, but I don't have it memorized. I can tell you every number that I had growing up for the old wall phone, and it's amazing how that technology has just taken over, and it's changed. It's shifted the paradigm, I think, about how we act and how we are as a people. Just the internet in general. I mean, it's a good thing, but it has its disadvantages too. It's given us an anonymity, but that's not always a good thing, because you get people that use that and then hide behind that and go out and wreak havoc with it. There's all kinds of people online that think nothing of saying things to you that they wouldn't dare say to your face. So again, anytime you have something wonderful, a new technology that makes things better and makes the world smaller and has the propensity to bring people together, then you've got the downsides to it too, and people that use it in a bad way. So I guess you just have to take the good with the bad. But
Yep.
Cisco in the chat and a couple other people here asking about Nikola Tesla. What can you tell us about Mr. Tesla? Do you have an opinion or any thoughts on him?
Yeah, so Tesla was right about a whole lot of things. He is kind of discredited because, I think he worked for, was it Westinghouse? And Westinghouse kind of took credit for a lot of his things, in particular the light bulb. Then there's the argument of AC versus DC current, and currently for our homes we're using for AC current, and some people think we should be using DC current. And, you can get into some of the speculation is like his earthquake machine that he had, and then the free energy for life. I don't know. I like to think that if he had some of those really interesting designs and patents, that somebody's got them somewhere. But if they do, there's no way that they're not going to make money from them. So I think that's probably lends more to the idea that they don't really exist, or maybe it was just an idea that was in his head that is not quite finished.
No.
So if those things do exist, there might be like a savant coming through in the next decade or maybe the next generation who maybe gets his hands on those and says, okay, yeah, I know how to finish this.
His whole story is just fascinating. And supposedly agents of the government, what specific agents I don't know, came in and took all his notes and things. And the man, I mean, he was brilliant, and he died in abject poverty. But I've got a piece of historical fiction that I'm working on that delves into the dawn of electricity. And I've studied a lot about Edison and the fight between him and Westinghouse. And Edison was not a nice person. It was about the nicest way I can say it. And it's amazing some of the lengths he went to. He even tried to pay the journalist when talking about the dangers of the other type of current to say that instead of something being electrocuted, it was Westinghoused, just to throw shade on the competition. But it's amazing. But Edison, and again, he stole a lot of his ideas, or it was things that his assistants found that he took credit for. But he was working on a machine that could speak with the dead, and that's one of the central parts of the novel that I'm working on. People claim that it never worked or anything, but in my fictional world, it did work. But what he heard scared him so bad he wanted it destroyed. But the person tasked with destroying it took it and went west with it, and then that's where the story really takes off. I won't give any more away. Buy the book when it comes out. But
that sounds fun.
But it's fascinating to think about.
Yep. Yeah. So it's hard to say, with all of these, they're great stories. I love to tell them. I love to hear them. But it's I don't know. I'm a firm believer that there's a grain of truth in most things, and if you dig, you might find it. And at minimum, there's absolutely parallels. You talk about some of these stories, and they all start to line up. I had a conversation with a gentleman last night for my podcast, and he writes a lot of articles about Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell, who famously committed suicide, both of them rock stars. And he is putting forth the idea that maybe it's not quite that black and white, and that there are elements of satanic rituals and occults that might come into play with both of those cases and many others. And the idea is that you start reviewing these things and you start seeing patterns, you start seeing parallels in the stories, and then you can't help but wonder, if there's connection somewhere. And
Yeah,
I think
and
probably there is.
yeah, and it's always easier to connect the dots after something's happened, I think, and you can connect them the wrong way. But I agree with you. I think there's some merit to that. Just so much that goes on, and again, that's one of the tenets supposedly of the Illuminati or the Rothschilds, whatever you want to talk about. They like to do everything in plain sight with some sort of a sign or a message or a number that they use to signify it to others that are in the know. And yeah, there's so many things that don't make sense. And I know I've talked with people about the old satanic panic that happened in the 80s and the 90s, and how that kind of brought things about and brought a lot of things to attention to the fore. But a lot of it was just hogwash too. You had, people like Bob Larson that built a whole radio ministry out of it, and anytime everybody called into his show, they would have somebody call in that had a demon, and he would cast it out live on the radio. Again, it's like the shows we were talking about there. I mean, it's based in truth and in things that people believe in. I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody's religious beliefs, but again, it made interesting radio. I mean, he had a huge audience and wrote books and things, and I don't know what he's doing today, if he's even still around. But I hear things about that still. The backwards masking, the McMartin preschool scandal, and all that. But some of that, you look into it, and it doesn't really seem that crazy. There are crazy elements to it, or maybe crazy people on the fringes that try to push one agenda or another. But I think anything, if you lift up the rug far enough, you're going to find some dirt.
Yep, absolutely. So, last topic, but we're kind of come up here on an hour, but you mentioned, the satanic panic and then, some of the parallels and that there's a grain of truth. And one of the things that I covered on my show, which is, a forbidden topic almost, is the idea of Pizzagate, right? And this is something that's big in the QAnon crowd. And you can easily discard it, but what I do on that show is I talk about how, like, yes, it's probably somewhat of a overblown idea, but let's boil it down to its core tenets. And its core tenets are that there are a group of elite people who operate in secret societies who prey on children pseudo openly. And it's difficult to swallow the idea that there is a large network of people. But then I mentioned that this has in fact already happened, and it's well documented. There was a court case recently in the last 2 years, I believe, against a group called NXIVM. And that started as a elite Ponzi scheme, peer-to-peer group, similar to how like Amway is set up and Primeric and the essential oils. It's all the same business model. But what this was, it was for like professional development and networking, right? But it catered to the Hollywood crowd. And so they, over the course of years, developed this platform, and you would bring in your friends and then sell these professional networking and professional development seminars and this, that, and the other, and whatever kind of hocus pocus that was. But running in parallel with this, but underneath the surface of the visible public company was a subsect of company, and that was actual human sex trafficking being conducted by the same group of people. And they used the open society company to recruit young men and women into the sex slavery cult. And they would even go as far as to branding these people. And famously, one of the women who's in jail now is Allison Mack, who you may remember as the blonde girl from the TV show Smallville. The little, yeah. She was one of the dominatrixes.
Doesn't she have the brand and everything? I think there's pictures of her with it. That's just
yeah. But these things are real and they happen. And so the media loves to portray the idea of Pizzagate as a right wing extremist conspiracy. And that may to some degree be kind of fair to say, right? But when we boil down the premise is unquestionable, right? So now we're only really talking about the degree and the specifics is really the only thing to question, because it literally happened in Hollywood like 2 years ago.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember reading about it and seeing some of the photos and things. I was just amazed. And that's one that came to life, that floated to the surface. It makes you wonder what else is out there, the ones that haven't been discovered yet, or that may never be. People doing the same things. And I always, even as a child, I saw that there were people that my mother knew that sold Tupperware or Stanley Home products, or later in life, Herbalife, and things like that. But again, it's the products are okay, but it was the whole idea behind that. The whole Amway, and Melissa Dawn talks about that. It's a cult. It's like Scientology or something. It's not, you're just not pushing these products, but it's the whole lifestyle that by selling, the most Tupperware in your neighborhood or Avon or whatever, you'll achieve, a higher consciousness, and your life will be better and you'll be a happier person and things. It becomes so much more than just, going door to door and selling things. It's an indoctrination.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's how they do it, and all the money funnels up to the top. And you never see any of it, and you kind of burned out all your friends by asking them to buy your Tupperware and your makeup and your essential oils. People, you got to know, like, if you haven't talked to a friend in 15 years and they call you and they want to stop by, they're selling
They're
something.
going to sell you something, Tupperware or Amway or Herbalife or insurance.
Thank God for COVID. You could just tell them, we got COVID. Sorry.
And I've noticed that some of the religious groups that go door to door, they're doing it through the mail now. I get things in the mail. I get the Watchtower and some of those things. They get them sent to me in the mail now. And I like looking at those. I like the artwork that they have in them. They have some of the most astounding apocalyptic artwork in there. And I don't know who does those paintings and stuff, but I'd hang them on my wall. But that's just the kind of person I'm. No offense to anyone who is a Jehovah's Witness or anything, any type of religion or whatever. I believe each their own. There's all kinds of different paths to where you're going. But said I probably like it for the wrong reasons. But I've always welcomed them in because I like to hear the doomsday scenario stuff.
Yeah, that would be an interesting topic of conversation right there, because so much of the things we talked about tonight, in my mind, really just kind of point to that. Looking Glass being broken. So there's an inevitable event allegedly on the horizon in the somewhat near future. In my opinion, that is, that doomsday scenario, and that could look like a million different things, depending on how you analyze it. But all the technology we talk about and the deceptions that we talk about, and I think really, I mean, that's where everything is headed. And not to say that that's a guarantee, because I think that's an option on the table, and it's really up to us what we want to do with our lives consciously to structure the way we live. It's always an option, but I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. I think at any point we can all get our heads on straight, become collectively good human beings, and treat each other with compassion and love and kindness, and forgiveness, and stop viewing each other as the enemy. And then we could absolutely avoid that fate. But it's going to take a great awakening, to quote the QAnon crowd a little bit. And that might look like a revival, religious revival. That might look like a spiritual awakening of sorts, of which there have been two or three in this country already. So
Hmm.
I do feel like there's a lot of hope.
Yeah, and you look back to some of the things that happened in the previous century, the Azusa Street revival, and some of that's kind of the way those religious movements broke out. Same around the turn of the century before that with the spiritualism movement. My grandmother on my mother's side, they were very involved in that and believed in all that at one time. They held seances and did the table tipping or the table tapping. My grandmother was a self-styled gypsy witch, told fortunes with tea leaves and coffee grounds and animal entrails and all kinds of lovely things like that. But later on, it fell back out of fashion. Maybe something like that'll make a comeback. The spiritualism movement, and everybody will have a Ouija board, and we'll meet in each other's homes for seances once all this lockdown is over. Who knows? I look forward to anything new and different. That's just my personality.
Yeah, I think everybody's over 2020 at the moment, so I think we're all ready to move on to the next thing, whatever that might
Yeah,
be.
I'm hoping it's going to be better. But personally, I've had the best year that I've ever had as far as my books and my shows and the things that I'm into like that. I've had a great year, but I know everybody else can't say the same. And I'm fortunate. This is what I do. I write. I do radio work and narration and voiceover stuff. I do music for film, television, scoring, things like that. I do it all from right here. I was a hermit anyway. I like to say I've been practicing for this for years. So, but I feel sorry for the people, that are out of work and don't have anything that they can do from home. It's got to be rough.
Yeah,
So,
no, absolutely. Heart goes out to them, and if that's you guys, keep on keeping on. Better days are ahead of us.
yeah,
You
I
just,
think things will get better. Well, Seth, I appreciate all the time you've given us tonight. I asked you for an hour, so you gave me an hour, and then I took an hour, so that's 2 hours. But go ahead, and I'm sure you've got other things you need to do and get on out of here. But we appreciate you coming on, and ask everybody in the chat to stick around for a moment. I've got a surprise for you after we say goodbye to Seth here. But again, it's Skinwalker Radio, and I don't know if there's any one place that you prefer that I'm listening to that at over another, but I put the link in there for the Apple podcast. I know it's also on Google, it's also on Spotify, and you're on YouTube now. Is that correct?
I don't really do a whole lot of YouTube. It's mostly just the podcast. I keep all the videos on Patreon. Just the audio stuff is free. If you want to see my ugly mug, Patreon is the place to go for that. So if you want to watch the video versions of the free audio, you can go to Patreon. It's only $1. That's just the way that I help offset some of the costs of the podcast a little bit. But yeah, Skinwalker Radio, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can check that out.
Good deal. And there's just some fantastic episodes on there. If you like what you've heard tonight, go listen to his podcast. Subscribe to his YouTube channel, even if he's not doing anything on there right now. That could change. Again, Seth, thank you. You've been one of the best guests I've ever had. Fascinating stuff. I could talk to you for another hour and a half.
Yeah, we'll do it again sometime. It was fun. We'll have to make this a semi-regular thing.
Okay, thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and cut your mic off here. And okay, sorry about that. I've just been muttering to myself here. I had my microphone turned off. I muted mine when I muted Seth, and Seth is no longer with us. What I was saying was, I have a friend, Jeannie, a good friend of mine. She's the one that sent those pictures I showed earlier. I actually said Janine, but Jeannie is what she likes to go by. She sent those pictures from Skinwalker Ranch, or near there. She's from Florida. She's out on vacation right now in the basin there, near Skinwalker Ranch. Well, she has a friend who we'll call KC. He's from the area. He's been touring around. Messaged with him earlier. He'd like to come on and share a little bit with y'all if that'd be all right. Let me get him on the phone here, and we'll bring KC in and see what he has. Sorry if you can hear all that noise there. Hey, Casey, how you doing, sir? Doing good. I'm going to go ahead and bring you live here. Okay, joining me now from live from Utah, Casey, who is from the area around Skinwalker Ranch there, and he has some stories to share with us. What you got for us, Casey?
Hey, Steve. So, yeah, I'm from the general area. I live about 2.5 hours west of the ranch. But as of right now, I'm actually sitting, looking out my hotel room window in the direction of the ranch, which I'm only about 5 miles away from. Um, and I come out here often. I love spending my time out here. Uh, I don't like to call myself a researcher because I'm not. I don't have any evidence other than my own personal stories.
Yeah, and that's me. People ask me, are you a researcher, are you an investigator? No, I'm a storyteller, a raconteur, if you will. I collect stories and I retell them. That's my forte. That's my thing. Uh, the research and the investigation, I mean, that has its place. But I'm more of a legend tripper, man. I like to go and just bask in the ambiance and say, I'm standing in the spot where this happened, or that to me, that's the fun. Cisco and I have talked about that. That the paranormal is like an onion, and you peel back one layer, there's another layer underneath that. So our previous guest there, Seth, was talking about how just about everybody that lives in that area, or a percentage of them, have had some kind of experiences. What have you seen or heard or experienced in that area around Skinwalker Ranch?
Well, my experiences, Steve, have been, uh, for the most part, audible. Usually, I've had very few visual things other than some unexplainable lights that I've seen moving erratically. But really, one of my favorite events that I got to experience was I had come out here with some friends for just a night. We came up, around 7 o'clock at night, and we were going to spend the night in the basin. The ranch gets all the notoriety up here, but this entire basin is where weird things happen. Uh, and so we were around the perimeter of the ranch. I like to respect people's property and not, I'm not the type that's going to go trespassing. So we were around the perimeter, and I had pulled off onto a bit of a dirt road, kind of pull off area, and kind of backed into it. And I just wanted to sit and listen and experience everything around me. Um, and upon pulling off the road, all the windows in the car were down, and I heard footsteps, like skittering footsteps, which can easily be accredited to, any number of the small critters that are out here. Uh, and I shushed everybody because I wanted to listen, and then I heard louder footsteps, louder, heavier footsteps pounding nearer to the car, uh, and then, as if, I mean, it sounded like it was right outside my driver's side window, within 3 feet of my head. I heard a loud, growling grunt repeated 3 times. I'll do my best impersonation of it was, uh, uh, just like that, and everyone in the car heard it.
And not something you'd want to hear in that area.
I was grabbing the shifter really quick, throwing her in drive. um, but I kept my wits about me to some extent. The fear was definitely there. It brought the fear into my head and my heart. And as I'm throwing it in drive, and having my foot on the brake pedal, I'm scanning my mirrors and checking my surroundings, because anything that made the sound that it did, I should, at that size, I should have been able to see it. Um, and I could see nothing. There was nothing there. I would have likened it to something the size of a bear, and there was nothing there. So it was very strange. It was exhilarating and fun, but everyone in the car heard it, and we moved on from there. Uh, and that's one of my favorite experiences. Like I said, I've seen the lights, in the sky. I've seen, there's definitely a feeling, a sensation when you're out here. Some nights you can come out here and it's peaceful, it's serene, it's one of the nicest places you could ever be. Other nights you come out here and it feels like you're being watched the entire time you're here. I like to say that this basin is alive. It's got its own consciousness. and it is aware of you, you know?
Yeah, there's definitely something there. It is a magnet or a hotbed, if you will, of activity. And I don't know if it has to do with the curse or if that's just on top of everything else, but it's amazing. I've never been in that particular area. I lived in Nevada for a few years and would often go over into to Utah, but I didn't get over near Skinwalker Ranch. But the whole desert can be that way. It's its own strange place, and it's a living, breathing place. Depending on where you go and what time you're there, it can be beautiful or it can be deadly. I've been, in the Mojave, I've been through Death Valley. Again, you have to be careful out there. Just natural
Absolutely.
things that can kill you, let alone anything supernatural or paranormal that may or may not be out there, which I fully believe there is.
As do I. As do I. I like to say I'm a believer, not a knower, because I do come out here and, for lack of a better term, do my own research. Not, I'm not a scientist. I'm not one of these professionals who does it for a living. I do it for my own experiences, and to turn myself from a believer into a knower. You know, I listened to what you and Seth were talking about prior, and the fact that so many people do have experiences, and that's what I want. I want that experience. I want to be able to say I know, not that I believe. I believe a lot of things, but what do I really know until I get to experience it for myself?
Hmm. Yeah,
And
there's
so
no teacher like experience, and I've often said that a skeptic is someone who just hasn't had the right paranormal experience yet.
well, you got that right. And that's me. I have a healthy amount of skepticism, but I am a believer because I have experienced a few things that I cannot explain. I mean, just they're they're unexplainable. And
Yeah,
I've talked to many people out here in the basin, and yeah, a lot of the folks out here have experiences on a regular occasion. And an answer I get a lot is, I don't. They'll say, I just don't pay any attention to it. Paying attention to it gives it power or
hmm,
whatever. Well, and sometimes it can be hard to drag that story out of some of the local folks up here, and they're wonderful people up here. I love coming out here and interacting with them, but when it does come to this subject and the ranch and the strangeness that is out here, they some of the folks can clam up a bit. It's nice when you can find someone and get in with a group of people that are open to explain it and talk about it, and share the stories, because I'm a believer in the sharing of information. If we're all willing to share information, we're all growing as a community, or as a people ourselves. So
absolutely, and that's one of our reasons for even having this channel. Number one, missing persons, and boosting the signal on that, and helping those people either be found or the closure for the families. But then the mystery side of it plays into that too, not just with the missing 411 type disappearances, but other things. There's a lot of stuff out there in the forests and the national parks. And Bill, the co-owner of the channel, and I, we've both had experiences that we just can't explain. I've had a lifetime full of them. He had one at Joshua Tree in California where he saw shimmering beings like the Glimmer Man, or whatever you want to have it, when he was lost out there. So we know what it's like, and we like to give this platform to people to tell their stories in a place where they won't be judged or ridiculed. And I know when I was gathering stories for my first book, a lot of the people, especially older people, they were reticent to talk about it. Sometimes, like I said, I had to drag it out of them with a log chain. But then once they saw that you had an open mind and that you were listening and you believed them and you weren't going to laugh at them, then they would open up, and then they would think of another story and one beyond that and maybe this. And it's fascinating. I think everybody has a story. And I've heard that so many times. People say, oh, well, I don't believe in all that. But there was this one time this happened. And there you go.
yep,
And I
yep,
love hearing those kind of stories. And I think in a lot of cases like that, I mean, there may be rational or scientific explanations for things, but there's some things that I've experienced that there is none. And it's just knowing how to take that. And the people, I think, that have those hardcore experiences, you either accept it and you believe, or you put yourself in denial of, oh, well, that can't be true, even though you experienced
Hmm.
it firsthand. So it's a fine line there to tread.
Absolutely, definitely. And growing up here in Utah, and I've lived in these mountains the majority of my life, and they're my passion. I love being in the wilderness and the outdoors. And many times I've had strange experiences, not just here in the basin, but down even closer to my own hometown, along the Wasatch Front, where just strange occurrences and things that it would be easy to turn to denial and just act like it didn't happen. But to be true to myself, I've got to look at it, almost take myself out of the situation, look at it as though I were watching a movie, and you know dissect it and really think what could have happened, what was happening. But I did experience it, and I find that's the healthiest way, the healthiest avenue for me to deal with some of these experiences, because they can be quite overwhelming. They can be they can stand the hair on the neck.
Absolutely. I mean, it can change the way you think about a lot of things, and some people it just kind of shorts their circuits, for lack of a better term. I mean, when you've believed something or disbelieved something all your life, and then here's it happens to you, that can be
Mhm.
hard to accept if your brain is so wired to thinking one way that sometimes that jolt of electricity that flips it the other way. I know people that have PTSD from paranormal
Mhm.
experiences, particularly with the more malevolent things like shadow men and some of the alien abductees and things. And that's where the whole concept of a shadow memory comes in, where it was so traumatizing that, like Whitley Strieber talks about, instead of seeing a reptilian, you saw owls or something like that, that your mind just put in place to kind of, as a stopgap, to keep you from reliving that horrible thing that you experienced.
Precisely. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, when I got to the point in my own discovery process, you know, I, I, I started this journey. I was very much into UFOs and, aliens, and especially specifically Roswell. And, I went down that rabbit hole as deep as I could find, I read every piece of literature I could find on it, watched every video I could find on it, sifted through the truth and the lies and everything else. I went down that rabbit hole as deep as I could. And then I moved on to Sasquatch. And, fortunately for me, I live in the mountains. They're 5 minutes from my front doorstep. I get to go out and look for that, every chance I want, anytime I want. Um, and then to come up here to the base, and the ranch was just the next logical step for me, because the way I like to explain this place up here is that it's a paranormal Disneyland. It's not just
I
Sasquatch.
love it. I
It's not
love it.
it, it's everything. I mean, if it's cryptid, if it's paranormal, if it's spooky and ghosts, there's stories about it up here. And and so for me, that was the next logical step in my progression, was okay, I want to go to Disneyland. I want to start, seeing where all this stuff's happening, because I have questions, and I want answers. But I often tell my children, want in one hand and do something else in the other, and see which one comes up
Heard that
first.
often growing up.
Exactly.
See
So
which fills up the quickest.
exactly. So, even though I want these things, I had to take it upon myself to come out here and experience the things that are here to experience, to gain that, potential knowledge or experience. And so that's why I do it. I heard, Seth mention that he personally hasn't been out here and doesn't know if he'd want to be. And I can definitely understand that. A lot of people wouldn't want to. And there's nights I'm out here when I don't want to be, because like I said earlier, it can be quite terrifying. It can be nothing more than a chill running up your spine that'll just set you on edge for the rest of the night.
Mhm.
Uh, but again, other nights you come up here. I bring my daughter up here with me all the time. She loves it, and uh, we'll come up here and just enjoy a night out at Bottle Hollow, and just relax and look at the stars, and peaceful as peaceful can be. But there's other times it's the exact opposite of that, and it's just a lot of fun, and it's you can't nail this, the activity down. You can't predict it. It happens when it wants to happen, and no amount of preparation or anything else is going to dictate when it chooses to interact. So it's a matter of just being here when it happens. At least that's what I've found.
Wow, it's just I love it. Love those stories. Like the idea of a paranormal Disneyland. I'd be there every day, and I'd want only the e-ticket rides. Giving away my age there. Disneyland, for those of you who don't know, before they had the bracelets and all that, you bought a little book of tickets, A, B, C, D, and E. And the E tickets were the best rides in the park, and you ended up spending those real quick and had the others left over. But I'd be all about a paranormal Disneyland. Well, Casey, thank you for joining us here on short notice and showing some of these lovely pictures that Jeannie has sent in,
Yeah,
the ranch and the ridge there. Would you come back some night and maybe spend a whole hour with us and tell some more stories of the desert and Utah and the basin and anything you want to talk about?
absolutely. I would love to. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
And yeah, some of those pictures she sent you. I mean, I don't know if you showed the one uh, yesterday, 2 days ago or yesterday. We were actually driving, and she took a picture of a cabin and posted it on Facebook. And one of the members of the groups where she posted it said, "Hey, what's that up in the corner of that picture?" And we looked at it and blew it up. And to look at the picture, it looks like two lights.
Yeah, I've got it on
Uh,
the screen right now,
just
and then
in that
I've got the blow up there that looks like the little bow tie UFO or whatever that is there. It's fascinating.
It was really interesting because when she took the picture, neither of us saw it. She was taking a picture of the cabin. It was a spooky looking cabin. It's right in between Bottle Hollow and the ranch itself, and it's just kind of a creepy looking cabin. It's a great picture, and when we they said, "What's that?" We looked at it and we blew it up, and wow, that's two lights. And I looked at the contrails around it, and those contrails, from my perception, had been there a while because they had actually bowed and turned, and had a curve in them. But that light it stayed pretty much the same from several different perspectives. She took, I think, about four pictures of that cabin, and it is in every one of those pictures,
Wow.
and it's in the
And for a
spot.
contrail to be curved like that, I don't think I've ever seen that. Some audience here will refer to them as chemtrails, but
Yeah.
usually they're just a straight line. I've seen them kind of curve across the horizon, from one
Mhm.
side to the other, but that's inverted. That's kind of a bowl shape. It looks like so.
It is. It is. And the only thing I
Fascinating capture,
was,
whatever it is.
yeah, I could just think maybe there was a high wind that had blown an old contrail out of proportion or into a strange formation. But I don't necessarily think that contrail was from that lighted object.
Yeah,
Uh,
it looks like there's a considerable distance there. Depending, it's
mhm.
hard to tell what kind of altitudes there are and how
Yeah,
different they could be apart, but still, it's just
but it was fascinating, and that someone else caught it on Facebook. We weren't trying to take, or she wasn't trying to take a picture of it. It was, like I said, the cabin, and for someone else to find it, that was so exciting. And things like that happen out here all the time. And like you said, I could go on for an hour with other stories, and yeah, I'd absolutely like to come back and share a few of other experiences I've had, because that'd be a lot of fun for me, and hopefully your listeners too.
okay. Well, great. Well, thanks again. I know we did this on short notice. Thanks to Jeannie for the pictures and for putting you and I together. And yeah, I look forward to having you back. I'll be in touch. And
Okay.
if anything that you want to push or advertise or shout out, you have a channel or anything yourself, or you just
I don't. I'll probably be making one eventually, but I'm still kicking around a few ideas in my head. The only thing I want to push is, let's all be friends and be open-minded, and just accept each other for who we are. And
right
there's no
on.
sense
It doesn't get any
having all
better
this
than that.
fighting.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And if you do have a channel, we'll certainly help you promote that. But I do want to have you back just for a storytelling session. I enjoy these campfire streams. That's I'm a raconteur. That's my thing. I love the storytelling and get me and another storyteller on here. Like Cisco's been on here with me before, and we've gone over 3 hours before, and only quit
Yeah.
them because we had to. Or, otherwise, me or the dog woman's going to float away, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
But thanks again. You guys enjoy out there, and
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
Jeannie hi. She's probably listening. But again,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Casey.
Hey, you're welcome. And we're going out to look around again tonight. So hopefully we'll come up with some new stuff, and I'll have some additional stories for you
Yeah,
beyond
got
what I already
stories,
got.
more pictures, anything. We got a willing audience here that loves this kind of thing.
Excellent. Excellent.
All
Well,
right.
great. Wish everybody well, and thanks for your time, and looking forward to doing it again.
Thanks again, sir. Have a great night.
You too. Bye bye.
Okay, folks, that was Casey. Just called in just a spur of the moment thing there. I knew originally we'd only planned to have Seth on for about an hour, and I ended up keeping him beyond that. But I had uh, okay, how about now? Do you have audio now? I haven't lost your hearing. I just okay. What happened? I had all the audio routed through Skype, so when I disconnected the first time with Seth, then I brought um, KC on, and then when I disconnected with him, it disconnected me, of course, from Skype, and there went the audio circuit that I was capturing. Anyway, what I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by Skype kicking me out like that, if you have any stories or anything yourself that you'd like to come on and tell, feel free. Contact me at stevestockton81@gmail.com. Or if you want to just continue emailing the stories in, have me narrate them like I do for our listener stories compilations, you can continue to do that. You can send it to the same address that I just gave, or you can send it to NationalParkMysteriesYT at gmail.com. That's another email address. That one goes to Bill. I'd like everybody to keep Bill in your thoughts and prayers tonight. He's a little under the weather, couldn't be here with us. I hope he got to listen in. But thanks for coming. That's going to wrap it up tonight. We just were a little over, right at 2 hours, I think. So a little bit shorter than some of Cisco and I's marathons. But I think that's going to do it for tonight. Let me go ahead and throw that screen back up there. Thanks again for Janie. Jeannie, I'm sorry, I'll get it right, Jeannie, eventually. I've called you everything tonight except your name. But thank you for the awesome photos. And thank you for hooking me up with KC. He'll be on as a guest at some point. I don't know. I'm hoping y'all can still hear me. Again, I've messed everything up here when I. Okay, now I should be back in stereo at least. And gave myself a little boost there in gain. I don't have any way of monitoring the audio without creating a hellacious echo. But if you can hear the sound of my voice, thanks to Seth Brees from Skinwalker Radio for being our guest tonight. Did an amazing job, told some great stories. Fascinating interview. One of my favorite guests that I've had on this show, and very, very knowledgeable. Go check out his podcast at see if I've still got the link here where I can put it up. Yeah, just that's the Apple version. It's also available on Google Podcasts, Spotify, probably anywhere that you get your podcasts, whatever catcher app you use, you can find Skinwalker Radio there. But definitely check it out. And thanks again to Jeannie, said it right that time, and KC. For their involvement with the show tonight. Love those pictures. Hopefully they'll have some more. And y'all seem to enjoy Casey's stories and things. We'll get him back for at least an hour some night here soon. And hopefully they'll have some even new adventures to report back to us. Again, thanks for the well wishes for Bill there. Thanks for the super chats and donations tonight. We appreciate it. That helps us immensely, like you wouldn't believe. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Happy weekend coming up. Good morning, good night, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. I love every one of you. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'm out of here. Good night, everybody.